They say death row is meant for adults, for those who commit the kind of crimes too dark to forgive. But it twists into something far more disturbing when the faces behind those crimes are still young, some barely in their teens. And the acts, they're not just brutal, they're chilling enough to make your skin crawl. What pushes a child that far? Is it thrill, curiosity, or something colder? Prepare to descend into the darkest corners of teenage violence. These are the youngest people sentenced to death row in the U.S.
George Stinney Jr. 76 years ago, the execution of a young black teen made history in South Carolina. He was just 14, barely a teenager. But in the eyes of the law, George might as well have been a grown man, not for what he did, but for what they said he did. Two young white girls were found dead in a ditch, and before the dirt could even settle over their graves, George was named the monster behind it.
They had no choice in how they died, and he did. And I think the justice was served according to the laws in 1944 when this happened.
83 days. That's all it took from accusation to execution. No attorney, no parents, no real evidence. Just a boy, alone, scared, and swallowed whole by a system that never gave him a chance to speak. During the trial, his attorney called no witnesses, asked no questions, and filed no appeal. It happened in the town of Alcalu, South Carolina, on March 10, 1944. Betty June Binnicker was 11, Mary Emma Timms just 7. Their bodies were found near the railroad tracks, their skulls crushed by a railroad spike. The town wanted justice fast, and George, he had been the last to see them alive. They had asked him where to find passion flowers. That small exchange was all it took for suspicion to turn into blame.
But the girl's family members, the two victims in this case, they still believe he was guilty.
No real investigation followed. No fingerprints, no weapon, just a hasty arrest and an even hastier trial. It lasted 2.5 hours. The jury, all white, all male, needed only 10 minutes to decide George's fate. 10 minutes to take a life. On June 16, 1994, George was strapped into an electric chair built for grown men. He was so small, they had to stack Bibles beneath him just to make the straps fit. And then they flipped the switch. The youngest person executed in the U.S. during the 20th century. Just like that, he was gone. For decades, the story was buried. Just another closed case, another black body lost to time. But 70 years later, the past clawed its way back. New evidence came forward, witnesses re-examined, and finally, in 2014, a judge overturned the conviction, called it what it truly was, a great injustice. But by then, it was too late. An innocent child had been erased.
George Stinney could not have committed these murders, but I don't think George Stinney was the last person to see those children.
George Stinney Jr. became more than a name. He became a symbol, a haunting reminder of what happens when fear and prejudice replace justice. And the real killer, still unknown, still free, and still out there.
You ever hear a story so twisted it leaves your stomach in knots? Not because it's gory, though this one definitely is, but because the truth gets messier the deeper you dig. That's what happened in Amarillo, Texas on Halloween morning 1981. The convent of St. Francis was supposed to be a place of peace, a sanctuary. But that morning, it became a crime scene, soaked in horror. Inside, they found the body of 76-year-old Sister Thaddeus Benz, beaten, assaulted, left like some discarded thing. She wasn't just killed, she was violated in a way that made even seasoned detectives look away. And just like that, the quiet little neighborhood wasn't so quiet anymore. Sirens screamed through the streets, doors were locked, curtains drawn, and everywhere, one question echoed louder than the rest. Who could do something like this? It didn't take long for the police to come knocking. Across the street, that's where they found 17-year-old Johnny Frank Garrett, shy, withdrawn, practically invisible if you weren't looking for him. He lived just feet away from the convent, and on the surface, he didn't seem like a monster. But behind that awkward smile was a storm. Years of abuse, trauma, and pain nobody wanted to talk about, until now. The evidence came in hard and fast. Fingerprints, a kitchen knife that matched the wounds, and a witness who claimed they saw him running from the scene. On November 9th, Garrett was arrested. Rape and murder conviction followed like clockwork. But here's where it gets murky. Even with all the evidence stacked high, Johnny never confessed. He swore he was innocent right up to the end, and that claim would go on to stir one of the most controversial cases in Texas history. He was sentenced to death. Death for a crime that he insisted he didn't commit. For years, he sat on death row, watching time run out, until out of nowhere, a voice from the Vatican stepped in. Pope John Paul II himself pleaded for mercy, and for a second, it looked like that prayer had worked. Texas Governor Ann Richards granted a temporary reprieve, one more breath, one more day. But mercy doesn't last long in Texas. The Board of Pardons and Paroles held a vote, 17-1, not in his favor. No commutation, no life sentence, just death. Scheduled for February 11th, 1992. He was 28. When they asked what he wanted for his final meal, he didn't ask for steak or lobster. He asked for ice cream. Just that. Maybe it reminded him of a time before the darkness, or maybe he just stopped caring. But his final words, they were anything but sweet. The rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving air. Then the needle went in, and it was over. Or was it? Because years later, new evidence started to surface. Evidence that suggested, maybe, just maybe, they got the wrong guy. A different suspect, a new story. But Sister Thadia was still gone. And Garrett, well, he'd already paid the price, whether he was guilty or not. While Garrett's death toll may be filled with controversy, the next sure felt a lot more like justice.
On a quiet night in Oklahoma City, March 5, 1986, something unthinkable unfolded behind the doors of a modest family home. The bodies had been discovered by Vonda's 16-year-old son, Sean, who said he'd called in after staying the night with a friend. 16-year-old Sean Sellers crept through the shadows, barefoot, dressed in nothing but his underwear, a .44 caliber revolver gripped in his hand. His mother and stepfather slept soundly. One by one, he pulled the trigger. Calm, methodical, no panic, no regret. By the time the gun fell silent, 2 lives had been stolen in their own bed. And with chilling calculation, Sean staged the scene to look like a burglary gone wrong. But this wasn't some impulsive crime of passion. It was premeditated and fueled by something far darker. People would later ask, what could push such an ordinary-looking teenager to kill his own flesh and blood in such a cold-blooded way? The answer lay in Sean's growing obsession with Satanism. He wanted to learn more about demons. He wanted to learn more about the 4 dark forces of the world. His life had twisted into a grim ritual of blood-wrinking, whispered chants, and hours spent poring over the Satanic Bible. In his eyes, murder wasn't just murder, it was devotion, a ritual, a prayer made in violence. As I continued and got deeper into it, it eventually became an obsession with me, and then definitely took control of my life. But this wasn't Sean's first kill. 6 months earlier, September 8, 1985, he shot and killed Robert Paul Bauer, a 32-year-old Circle K clerk. The reason? The man refused to sell beer to Sean's friend. Sellers confessed later, admitting he'd done it simply to know what it feels like to kill somebody. But his cruelty didn't end there. Days before killing his parents, Sean secretly laced his mother's coffee with rat poison just because she disapproved of his girlfriend. The reckoning, however, came fast. That his mother, Vonda, must die, it's just how to do it. On March 6, 1986, barely 24 hours after the double murder, Sean was arrested. In court, his lawyer claimed Sellers was possessed by a demon named Ezra Day. There was even talk of Dungeons & Dragons addiction driving him to madness, but the jury wasn't buying it. Sean Sellers was found guilty of multiple murders and sentenced to death that same year. As years passed, Sean publicly declared he'd found Christianity, appeared on television, expressing remorse, begging for clemency through his newfound faith. That you would choose people who didn't give to society anything. But nothing changed the outcome. On February 4, 1999, Sean Sellers was executed by lethal injection. For his last meal, he chose Chinese food, egg rolls, sweet and sour shrimp, and batter-fried shrimp. For some, his death marked justice served, but the next case that would grip the public's attention wasn't about a killer. It was about an innocent boy whose life was stolen in an entirely different kind of tragedy.